your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Chrissie is hilarious.
Chrissie, have you ever heard of the comedian Basha K. Ali?
No, that sounds like something you yell at before you blow up a plane.
30 seconds remaining.
But you know what, Chrissie, to say I dabbled in stand-up or something, I haven't been disrespectful to you at all.
I was very confused by the title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's also what we call it when Ash takes off his shirt. I shouldn't be up here. I should be in school on the other side of the ocean. What's up, boys and girls? Welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. I am your host, Chrissie Mayr. You can listen to this show. Gosh, we're everywhere. YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Rumble, Rockfin, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook even. For the two of you that are watching on Facebook, welcome. I'm really excited about our guest today. Before I bring her on, I have a comedy show to promote. This is very exciting. In 3 weeks, guys, you can come see me on stage. This is very exciting. Tickets are now available. Come see me Saturday, October 5th in Mount Kisco. Called Kisco Comedy Night. You can get tickets on Eventbrite or on my website here, ChrissieMayr.com. That's MAYR. 7:00 show. Come see myself. Gino Bisconti will be on. He's a really funny friend of mine, as will Fred Rubino, who's another very funny friend of mine. He goes back and forth between Florida and New York, and this is just going to be, it's great. The three of us, it's going to be a winning combo. Come see us in Westchester, New York, Saturday, October 5th, Mount Kisco at 11 Carpenter Avenue in Mount Kisco. This is right around the corner from my gym. Maybe I'll get some of my gym people to come. And as always, like and subscribe on this channel, please. I don't know what you're waiting for. If you're just here listening without a like and a subscribe, I'm a little offended. Okay. Without further ado, I'm so excited to have this gal on. As you guys know, I have talked to a ton of gals and guys in the adult industry. And I focused a lot of those interviews on my show that I had on Compound Media, the Wet Spot. So this is a very interesting journey. I'm really excited that she's here. She's actually somebody who kind of converted to Catholicism. I'm just so excited to hear from her how she turned away from a life in the adult industry. Welcome to the show, Bree Solstad.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited that you're here. I've been reading a bunch of interviews about you, and I know, and I'm trying not to ask you the same questions that everybody else has asked you, but at the same time, like, this is a new audience. And yes, everybody in the chat, this is live, so you guys can ask Bree your questions as well. But just give me a sense of, I know that you're from Alaska originally, and single mom. And I know people go, oh, like all the hallmarks, like you must have got into the industry because of daddy issues. And I don't know. And so how much do you think those stereotypes really have to do with someone's propensity to be drawn into the adult industry?
It's hard to say, really. And before I answer that, I do want to thank you, especially for having me. I don't think that I'm your normal viewpoint on the adult industry, so I appreciate you opening up and having me as a guest. So I think that a lot of like falling into the adult industry is probably just you're at, this particular time in your life, and it just so happened that it just fell into your lap, and the wheels all clicked into place. But at the same time, I have to wonder if I were exposed to, a quote unquote normal relationship between a man and a woman, my parents, if I would have had different values, if I would have considered, men differently, if I would have had more thought of myself and like as a beautiful specimen only to be cherished by my husband or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think that um, for myself, I don't even want to put out a percentage there of like how much
Yeah.
that really impacted me. On one hand, like I do kind of struggle talking about like you know how I was raised because on one hand, like my mother did the best she could. She made a lot of incredible sacrifices for me, and I almost feel like I'm like throwing her under the bus by saying otherwise. But at the same time, on the other hand, like I said, if I had had that kind of relationship as a model, then maybe I would have thought differently about joining the adult industry.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. My parents didn't have a great marriage, and it took me all of my 20s to kind of realize that, me and my husband are not my parents, and we're not going to have the same fights, and it's not going to be the same dynamic, and that,
Mhm.
you know, it's not every marriage is Al and Peggy Bundy from Married with
Yeah.
Children, because
Mhm.
that's what I watched like basically every day as a kid. I was like, "Oh, it's just like resentment central."
Right.
Um so yeah, that's why it's hard being an adult. You have to kind of our parents are you have to remember that. Like I had an angry phase with my parents too, and you realize like they're just doing the best with what they have at the time.
Mhm.
And a lot of times we have to sort of finish raising ourselves.
And I think a
And
lot is like we take on the chips of the shoulders of our parents. So my
yes.
mother being a single parent, her and then her parents being of a certain age, a certain generation, they weren't too happy about her being a single parent. And so therefore she raised me kind of to think that I was, you know, I could be an independent woman and I didn't need a man for anything. And those are good values. But at the same time, like it's not just human behavior, it's animal behavior to like be born with the defenses that are put in place by your parents, like water fleas will be born with horns on them if their parents detect some sort of threat in the water. And so I like to
Wow.
kind of think, yeah, and then every subsequent generation after that will be born with horns until the threat has been removed, and then they'll go back to being normal water fleas. I
That is
heard that.
so fascinating. I feel like there must be something similar for
Mhm.
like feminist women, like
Yeah,
the
right.
horns are just there
Hmm.
sometimes. I got
Yeah.
my horns in college for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
I
Yeah, and
heard
we're
that
all
on a
adapting to
podcast.
our
I thought it was.
surroundings. We're all a product of
Hmm.
our parents and our surroundings. So,
Nurture
tell
and
me
yeah.
tell me about how you, I guess, sort of got into the industry. How old
Well,
were you?
yeah. I was, let's see, in my 20s, and I was no longer in college. But I didn't have any kind of like meaningful career or really anything meaningful in my life.
What did you go to school for? Like, what did you go to college thinking you would be?
Environmental science. So yeah, I haven't used much of that other than the water flea comment.
Yeah, but see, I should have known that.
Um, and I didn't actually get that from college. I heard that on a podcast. But so yeah, I think in my 20s, my main focus was just drinking, partying, and like taking it to the next level, like not just drinking and partying, but like blackout drunk, being very promiscuous, reckless, kind of dangerous behavior. Um, Looking back on it, it's kind of scary, but at the time it was like, yeah, this is what every 20-year-old does. You have
And
those.
it goes
Right.
hand in hand. Like, you can't really make those reckless decisions unless you're inebriated. You know, if we all spend college sober,
Right. Exactly.
it would have been a lot different. So,
Mhm. And so at that time, yeah, just drinking a lot, already being promiscuous. Oh, I also started a blog about my promiscuous behavior and yeah, not having anything meaningful, going from dead end to job to dead end job. And the blog that I was writing attracted the attention of a pretty prominent sex worker who filmed pornography, but the type of pornography she did was just POV, so point of view. She hardly ever interacted with anybody, and it was a focus essentially on um, female domination, so females dominating males, and it's a mental domination. When you're not in the same space as anybody else, then it becomes primarily like a psychological domination. And there's a lot of humiliation and degradation, all those shuns. And I think that's kind of important to note that, like, the reason I think part of the reason, at least, that I jumped at this chance is it's because she didn't recruit me saying, "Hey, do you want to have sex with men on camera?" It was more, do you want to humiliate men and potentially make a lot of money? And I was like, well, that sounds kind of weird, but yeah, sure, I'll give it a try.
I like the money part.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I like the money part. I like working from home, being my own boss, making my own content, being in charge of my own content. Um, and then, yeah, it turned out that I was really good at it. That's one of the things that she said when she first contacted me was like, based on my blog, I had like a real like bratty kind of appeal. I was super narcissistic, egotistical. And I was like, yeah, check, 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 all those things. And I quickly became really good at what I did and really popular. And a lot of people ask, like, if the money hadn't been good, would you have continued? And no, no way. But for those potential like porn industry workers in the future who are listening, it didn't come easy either. It was a constant hustle. And you have to feel okay about insulting people on a regular basis. And you have to feel like you are the best, you are a goddess, you are above everybody else. And particularly in the industry that I was in, the niche of the industry I was in, you have to be really not only okay with, but really good at being insulting and mean. I remember one of the first cam sessions I did, the guy interrupted me and he was like, "You're really fun, but do you think you could be a little meaner?" And like,
Wow.
I was totally mortified by that. I was like, "Oh goodness, he's paying me and I'm totally failing at this job." And so I did some more research and I applied like a lot of psychological techniques that I learned throughout my research. And then eventually I started realizing that it wasn't just my job. It was like, I felt superior to people on a regular basis. And I know that's because, like, a lot of girls will say, this is just a job for me, and I make the money, and then, I become my normal self afterwards.
Hmm.
They don't like actually admit this sort of thing, but people have alluded to this kind of lifestyle. And I think that's really difficult to do when you work from home. You're surrounded by your studio. It's not like you know, punch a time card and then leave. You are constantly thinking of new things that you can do, constantly uploading and tweeting and posting. And so these things are in your subconscious, and they slowly start to seep into, at least for me, I should say, it slowly started to seep into who I was. And my value of money was just like totally skewed. My value of myself, of my appearance, of of men also. I still feel the effects of that. Like a lot of times when I'm in a place where I need to listen to an authority, like
Mm.
at the doctor, or I tried having a man personal trainer once, and that just like I just didn't have any respect for what he was saying, and I
Wow.
realized I think maybe part of that is my upbringing, but also I think a lot of what I did for my job, it wasn't just my job. It started to seep into who I was and really started to shape who I became.
And it seems like your foundation set you up for that because if you were raised to be, you know, your what late teens, early 20s or after college, you figure like, hey, I was raised by a single mom, like she got me here all by myself, like I'm fine. I didn't need a man. I didn't need a dad.
Hmm.
So kind of like what good are men generally? And
Hmm.
it's and like you said before, like we take on the horns, right? Those were the horns you got from your moms. Like,
Right.
do we really need men? Who knows? It's kind of
Hmm.
like this boomer, like kind of like post boomer mentality. Like I don't know,
Hmm.
a couple of the earlier waves of feminism kind of all crashing together,
Yeah.
and you're like, I guess I don't. And the allure of that is all that money is so powerful. And I think and I was mentioning this to you before we went live, and I wonder if sex work is so tempting to women because and I don't want to say women are not equipped to work a 9 to 5 job. That's obviously a sweeping generalization. But as someone who did I worked in the city for like 15 years. I've had like 16 day jobs and they all gave
Hmm.
me incredible stress. And once I started really working for myself, I was happier. Of course I could manage my time a little better and like, sometimes I'm unproductive, and then I put that, with becoming a mom, I just feel like a
Hmm.
huge weight was lifted off me the moment I stopped working for other people. And I don't know if that's a woman thing or just people with ADD, but
Hmm.
the fact that you can make a ton of money quickly at home, kind of just being yourself in a way and using all of
Hmm.
your strengths. Like women are very good, like we're perceptive, we are emotionally attuned to people. We're kind of born people pleasers, and anytime you have a strength, like there's a positive side to that and a negative side to that, and we can
You got
always
it.
use our
Yep.
our strengths for good or for evil, right? And if you're very perceptive and you can pick up on people's cues and almost like
Hmm.
give somebody what they want before they have to even ask for it, which is a positive
Precisely.
thing that can be used negatively. Like, oh, I have a feeling that that this man has these issues going on at home, and if I manipulate him this way, I can
You
give
got
him
it.
what he wants
Hmm.
without having to ask for it. You can basically read somebody's mind just by picking up on what somebody's giving you,
Hmm.
and that can all be used to excel in the adult industry,
Yeah.
basically.
I talk a lot about how, today's pornography is no longer your grandmother's porn. It's not just a DVD that you put in and you watch, two or more people engaging in sex, and that's it. They're just on your television. Now, today, especially with sites like OnlyFans, it's interactive and it's designed to be hypnotic. It's designed to be addictive. I mean, I know personally those are things that I really, looked out for and strived towards, is to get my clients seriously hooked. And it was a lot of and I had cam sessions with them on a regular basis, and these are like hour-long sessions where,
Wow.
it wasn't always sex talk or, some kind of or anything having to do with sex. Like, a lot of times we just talk about, our lives, and well, primarily they would talk about their lives. I would listen. I would, file away those certain nuggets of like things that I could use later.
Even make notes probably. I'm sure you made notes about everybody.
I did. Yeah, I had certain files on people, just things that I would want to remember or like catch up on. Or if I had like a lot of different clients at one time, I'd want to make sure, kind of like a doctor's office or a psychiatrist's
You're like a
office.
therapist,
Yeah.
really. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, where I wanted to make sure that like once when I was doing a session with them, like I wouldn't get them confused with somebody else. And, it's all about making him feel particularly like not special is not the right word, but like known, seen, I guess.
Scene. Yeah.
Hmm.
Or you're able to give him that particular thing that like their wife or girlfriend can't or won't, or maybe they haven't even opened up to wife or girlfriend about these particular
Hmm.
desires, or maybe it's men who've been burned by women and, you know, interacting with somebody on a campsite is like, okay, this is a nice band-aid. I'm not really opening myself up to be vulnerable, to get my heart broken again. I
Hmm.
can just kind of get my needs met without, risking heartbreak.
Hmm. A lot of times also like within my particular niche, it would be someone who had a very trying, demanding job, like an ER doctor. I had one client, or a CEO, uh, where every day was super stressful and making decisions that are incredibly difficult. And then, on the flip side of that, they would come home and they'd have a session with me where they didn't have to make any decisions whatsoever. I would tell them what to do. I would tell them, the things that they didn't hear throughout the day, like
Hmm.
kind of degrading things. Like nobody else in their life would talk to them like this, or even like they were, you know, thought of as like quite revered, or someone to be respected. And when they would get the disrespect from me, that was a huge turn on for them. That's really
Wow.
psychological. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
it.
because if you're the boss and you have, especially if you're good at what you do or you've been in power a while, everyone around you could be a yes person,
Hmm.
and people could be, kind of afraid of them in the workplace, and then here you are. And that's so strange. I always think it's interesting to get into like the psychological aspects of kinks. Like what is it about? Is it just you're hearing the opposite of what you hear all day, or is there something more to it that would make a guy, like a powerful man in real life, attracted to being humiliated, behind closed doors? I've never understood that fully.
I think it could be either one. It could be something like we were discussing, someone in a powerful position now is being degraded. And so that is attractive. And then a lot of times it's something that happens during puberty. So, um, one thing I used to do also is make custom videos, and a lot of them were really bizarre. And in all actuality, I really liked the bizarre ones because it made me think of like, okay, how can I get into this character of like who who it was that flipped that switch for them. So in puberty, maybe like you are like constantly in the background is like a certain Disney movie or something like that. And so you have your first erection during this Disney movie, like for some reason or another. Now your brain associates the good feelings of an erection, of arousal, with this Disney princess, and so then sometimes, I guess, like if that continues to happen over and over, there's where your fetish is born.
Or like the plant from Wally or something, or Cars,
Mhm.
or what are the other
Mhm.
movies?
I love
But like
Wally.
Frozen, like every time I see an icicle, I just
Mhm.
get excited.
Mhm.
That is funny. So that it's you forget what a like kids are obviously sponges, and but you forget
Mhm.
like puberty. Yeah, that is a very sponge like time in your life. And
Mhm.
what is that? I guess between what, 10 and 14, or
It should be, yeah. Mhm.
geez,
Nowadays,
yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, it's literally like neurons are being formed, like links, like you're kind of setting your adult sexual psychology up for the rest of your life in a sense. I mean, I'm sure you could
Mhm.
deprogram yourself a bit later on, but it's such a formidable time. Wow, that's
Yeah.
and of course probably most people are not, they're maybe not aware of that. They maybe don't
Yeah.
know. And so part of your job is to kind of like tap into that and figure out
Mhm.
like what makes this person tick and why. And
And I guess one of the reasons why I regret what I did was because I not only tapped into those things, but I nurtured them. And you mentioned like possibly there could be some sort of deprogramming. Me, I was the exact opposite of that. I just, hammered in those those fetishes and that attraction. But I think deprogramming it is getting out into the real world, and I imagine, I can only just assume that it's got to be a lot easier just to, hang out at home and turn on the computer,
Yeah.
um, instead of trying to find someone who, in your mind probably will never live up to this kink or this fantasy. And that's probably one of the most damaging things that a man could do to himself.
But it's gonna be unbalanced. It's just like, yeah, you could love ice cream, but if you're just eating ice cream, like you're not gonna be a healthy person.
Hmm.
And if you're just um feeding into if you're just like, oh, I'm aware of my sexual desires and I'm just gonna meet them no matter what. I'm gonna
Hmm.
I'm calling out of work. This is what I'm gonna do. Yeah, I'm not explaining this well, but like just because I feel like I've changed so much over the last like 10 years, like just
Yeah,
because you
ditto.
know what they are and you could like just stay home and just whatever. Get yourself whatever. All day. That's what you're gonna do all day is just have a field day. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean like not only is it kind of unproductive, of course, like you're gonna lead an unbalanced. I'm just thinking how I would give advice to like a younger person. It's like, okay, so you know what your kinks are. So what? You like to have sex. It's kind of like I'm at this place now. I'm like, okay, big deal. You got other stuff to do with
Yeah.
your day. Like just because something feels good and you know what you like does not mean you should spend all day or hours and hours doing it. It's like it really is just it becomes too much and then you get to a point where if you're just focusing on like the sex part of your life, either with a partner or someone on a cam site or something, you're leaving so many other aspects of your life kind of ignored. And especially if
Hmm.
you are looking for a partner, you're spending the peak hours of your day, your interest, right, and your money, resources, you're spending it on someone who's not going to be that partner for you.
Hmm.
So you're kind of like investing into something that's ultimately never going to pay off for you because they were never, they're not going to get you to be their girlfriend or wife.
Hmm.
You're just a fantasy or whoever they're talking to. And
And then it's like if you eat ice cream every day or you indulge in ice cream all day long, not only is that going to make you completely unhealthy, but after a while, it's not going to be enough for you. And so then, and it's not even enjoyable to eat the ice cream anymore. It's just you are so obsessed with the fact that you have to eat ice cream. Now it's become an addiction. And so, not only, and this is incredibly easy to happen with, well, I think that a lot of us don't admit that we can become addicted to anything at the drop of a hat as long as those neurons are firing and something is telling us that it feels good or it is good. And don't get me wrong, I love ice cream and I totally understand how things like masturbation and you know sexual fetishes, those things feel like they're rewarding. How do you get into some sort of addiction? It's not like you sign up to be, okay, yes, I please pick me. I'd love to be addicted to alcohol. No, it's because something in your brain tells you that it feels good. And for the most part, addictions are, trying to get out of right here, right now. So anything that will do that. And
hmm,
pornography is great for that because it's usually involves some sort of fantasy. I mean, if not always involves some sort of fantasy because like you mentioned, you're never going to be with that woman or with that man, so it is a fantasy, and it feels good and it's something that you can control, for even 5 minutes out of the day or maybe the whole day. You're in control of what you see and what you do, whereas the outside world, that can be a little disconcerting and out of control sometimes. But if you're, but then back to my point where it becomes an addiction, and then ice cream is no longer enough. You have to get like ice cream with, hot fudge on it. And then you do that every single day. And so if you do it every day, it's no longer a treat. And if you do it all the time, it becomes an addiction because you're not even, rewarding yourself with the ice cream anymore. It's just you need it. And that's a slippery slope, I think. And
Then you have to have ice cream in the shower, and you're like, this isn't even good. It's
yeah,
melting faster this way.
right, yeah.
But it's just not enough. Vanilla is not
Hmm.
enough anymore. Okay, wow. That's so interesting. So it's and not everyone, I guess, is set up to have like it. Well, that's the thing. You don't really know if you are predisposed to addiction until you're going through it, right? So um it's just
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like yeah, I guess being a mom has like really changed my brain because I think about like how I would give advice to like a younger person. Because right, when you're in your I guess teens and 20s, it's like it's the most exciting thing. You're like, wow, I figured out how to do this. It feels good. Why would I not do this? Why would I do
Hmm.
anything other than this? And then you add in, especially for girls, like, wow, I can make money. I don't have to like go, you don't have to go on lame job interviews. You don't have to put on a suit and heels and go into the city and like,
Hmm.
you know,
Well,
get a
maybe I could
resume
help.
together.
Um, I think a couple of things to focus on are, well, how it makes you internally, not just, psychologically. Now your view of the opposite sex is totally skewed. You're also limiting yourself to a relationship in your 20s. Yeah, maybe that's not going to be that big of a deal. Maybe later in life that will speak to you more. But also you're affecting yourself, actually physically. Your brain chemicals start to change during addiction and you know during pleasure. Even if you eat a piece of chocolate, your serotonin levels go up. It's the same with masturbation, it's the same with pornography. So you're actually changing your brain chemistry to open yourself up to addiction. Now maybe
Wow.
that's not enough. So another thing I'd like for people to really consider is the sex trade industry. You as a consumer of pornography, you as a producer of pornography, you know you are increasing sex trade. You are, in a way, in a small way, maybe in a larger way, you are contributing to young children, getting ripped from their homes and forced to be sex slaves for the rest of their lives. Imagine if one of the videos that you made that you thought was completely harmless, you made it, here at your home, you posted it onto some sort of site, take your pick. And imagine that video is being shown to like 7 and 8-year-old girls on how to be pretty and attract men. Like
Wow.
that's their like introduction video to this life, is something that you made. Like, how gross is that? Can
I
you
never
imagine?
even thought of that content is something that's shown to children, like, as a way to groom them into
Hmm.
also that's insane. I mean, that makes so much sense. That's so heartbreaking. Um,
And then there's the whole God aspect. When we sin, we create a rip between us and Jesus. And maybe that doesn't mean that much for most people, but I'm lucky enough to say that it means a lot to me. And for some people, I think having God in their lives is tricky and maybe even kind of painful. But for me, that is the reason why I quit porn, is because of my relationship with God. And I realized that I couldn't have it both ways. I couldn't go to mass every Sunday, and sit there and be a producer of porn at the same time.
were
And
you raised Catholic?
no, I was raised Lutheran, and I think that's a significant difference because most Protestants think that, it was actually Martin Luther who said from the pulpit, I can go out and commit adultery 100 times a day and God will wash me clean of my sins as long as there's the typical phrases, as long as I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in my heart. And that's just that's what I did all throughout my life. Is I had God in a way. I didn't have the close relationship that I have now, but I did have God in my life. But it never really, like, one never had anything to do with the other, God and my career in porn. I kept them very separate, compartmentalized, and mainly because I believed that, yeah, my sins have nothing to do with God or myself. I never really thought that if I stopped doing things that were detrimental to myself or to others, that would make me happier. I thought that, being the way that I was and making a lot of money and having a position of quote unquote power over men, I thought that's what was going to make me happy, and it wasn't. Um, I've been asked, like, well, what is it that you gave up when you stopped doing porn and turned Catholic? And the answer really is nothing. All I did is gain acceptance, mercy, forgiveness, love, not just from God, but from myself as well.
Wow. And so this woman that I guess sort of, would you say she recruited you, or she just
Mhm.
said like you would be great at this? What did she get out of it? Did she, did you pay her like a percentage, or like, what did this woman get out of sort of recruiting you?
No, I think what she mainly gained from it was like a doting admirer, for a little while, because I thought that she was so incredible. She lived in this magnificent, huge house. She had all these amazing clothes, went on lots of vacations, and she didn't pay for anything. She had other people pay for them. And I thought that was just so incredible, and I just wanted to be, in that same particular place. And I think, you know being a part of the sex industry, or maybe even having friends that are in the sex industry, you quickly learn that most of these women are um, not very, like, they're kind of psychologically um, skewed in a way, that there's not, that there's something kind of a little bit off with all of them, and myself included. um, Daddy issues right here, and also like the whole, megalomania. But so it took me a little while, but I learned that primarily what she got out of it was somebody who, hung on her every word for a little while. And until I started making more money than she did, and then she kind of threw a fit and like unfriended me, and
Oh,
typical,
wow.
yeah, typical of this type of friendship. And I think it's really difficult for two women, at least within my niche, to be friends. And I did have, and still have, two really dear friends who are in the industry. But that's kind of a unicorn, and it's nobody's fault really. If you think of it psychologically,
Yeah.
again, it makes perfect sense. We're all complete narcissists, so how are we going to be friends?
Yeah. Wow. And so how many years are you going along doing this? I think you said what, about 10 years?
Mhm. Yep.
And then so what changed?
Mm. Primarily, what happened to me is what I would describe as the greatest tragedy of my life. And something happened where, if you knew me, you would understand that it's something that, it's been 3 years of therapy, and I'm never going to be completely over it. It was something that hurt me tremendously, and also brought on a huge amount of guilt and shame and just complete depression. When it happened, I considered that the only way I could really go on would be to kill myself, which doesn't really make sense linguistically. And I started therapy soon after, but just didn't want to have anything to do with anybody. And I especially didn't want to have anything to do with God. Like I said, I had God in my life kind of, but I wasn't really going to church or anything like that. But I was raised going, having gone to church. And the night that this happened to me, I remember thinking, that he could have prevented it. God could have prevented it. And I begged him. I got down on my knees and I squeezed my knuckles so hard that I could still remember how white they were. And I thought to myself, like, I prayed, please don't let this happen. Please, please, take it back. And he didn't. He let it happen. And I was outraged and so mad at God. I think mainly because I didn't have anybody else to be mad at. It was a freak accident. And the only other person that I could really blame would be myself. So I turned away from God completely, thinking that he had turned away from me. And then just became like a complete, like, empty shell of a person. And I went on like this for, a few years. I was in therapy. But at the same time, I just thought to myself, well, this is it. This is as good as it's going to get. This is how it's going to be from now on. And then I had an opportunity last year to go to Italy. And so I thought, yeah, definitely, that'd be great. I'd love to go to Italy. And so doing some research, I realized that, well, it was confirmed that the greatest artwork in all of Western civilization is found, primarily in Rome. And within Rome, it's found almost exclusively in churches and basilicas. And I had tried to go to church. A friend of mine wanted to take me to Christmas Eve service, like, prior to Italy. And I spent the whole time just hysterically crying, I think, just because
Wow.
I was still so mad at God. And even being in the house of God, being nearer to him, like, it was too much for me. And I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom like a couple of times. But it was weird because I never had that sort of feelings or that sort of intimidation with my trip to Italy. And I think mainly because the artwork they're masterpieces. And so I didn't really think of it as much like the house of God as much as like a museum or like an art show. But then something started to kind of change. And I started appreciating the art, not just for its beauty, but also for the theology and the meaning behind it. Um, and then I started to acknowledge, Jesus on the cross, his greatest gift to us. He forgave our sins by dying on that cross. And opposed to a Protestant church where there's normally just a cross, like every Catholic church has a crucifix smack dab right in the middle
Hmm.
for you to see as soon as you walk in. So there's really no avoiding it. And I started to acknowledge him on the cross, but it was still too hard for me. And then I started to see Mary, our beloved mother, and she's everywhere in Rome, but also in the Catholic Church. And this was something completely new for me. We don't really have much of a relationship with Mary as Lutherans. Um, and I started to see her, notice her, and it wasn't like Jesus where she was right there on display. It was more like she was always kind of off in a corner or like hidden in an alcove. So it was kind of like a game almost, like, where's
Hmm.
Waldo,
Like, where's Mary?
So yeah, we acknowledge the crucifix, we look at the artwork. Now where's Mary? And I would go and I'd seek her out, and I started talking to her. And I cried a lot in the beginning. But I started talking to her because even though I was still so mad at God, I felt like I could talk to her because she was human. And she went through the greatest tragedy ever known within, humanity. And she went through it with grace and with dignity and beauty and resolve. And I thought, well, if she could do that, maybe I could also kind of, you know, maybe there was still hope for my life. Maybe I didn't have to live it the way that I was, as this complete hollow shell. And from there, just these feelings started to increase. And we had the opportunity to go and visit Assisi, which is a town in Italy famous primarily for two saints who, um, one of them is really into animals. St. Francis, and I'm also really into animals. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's go visit him. Then there's also St. Clare, who lives in Italy, or who lives in Assisi, excuse me. And I didn't know much about her, but I knew that she was one of the incorrupted saints, which means that her body is completely still intact. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty incredible. And so and I went and had the opportunity to kneel in front of her tomb. Now, I'd had this opportunity at other saints within Italy, but just kind of, I was like, no, that's fine. I don't really want to. But for some reason, I really wanted to go and kneel before her. And when I did, I closed my eyes, and I don't claim to be some sort of mystic or some sort of religious. Um, but I saw her. I closed my eyes, and she appeared before me. She was seated with her legs crossed and her arms open, and her face was completely obscured in light. And she said to me, "You don't have to do this all on your own. You can put her here," meaning my tragedy. "See how soft my forearms are, and see how soft my lap is. You can put her here, and I'll take care of her." And I I got up after that, and I went back up the stairs. We went to meet with our tour guide, and I didn't really think much of it. I was like, no, that was probably just like a figment of my imagination. But then the more I thought about it, the more I considered, like, well, if it were just a figment of my imagination, why is she dressed like a bridesmaid? Like, why wouldn't she be dressed in, the clothes that I knew that she wore at the time? Why would she say that weird thing about her forearms? It's kind of obscure. Um, and then I started reading more about her, and it's throughout history, she's actually done this with several people. And there's an account from a nun, I believe in the 1600s, where she wrote how the same sort of thing, how St. Clare gestured to her lap and talked about how soft her arms were. And when I read that, it totally blew me away.
Wow.
Um,
How quickly did this happen? It just seems like, you're not like drunk or high or anything. You just,
yeah.
walk into this church, right? Or no, you were in a church, right? Not a
Mhm.
museum.
Yep.
And like you have this, right, you're Lutheran, and I was raised Methodist, so they don't focus on the saints at
Mhm.
all. And it's like
Right.
they're really against the imagery. Like Protestant churches are usually pretty plain,
Mhm.
just kind of like white, and not about all the stained glass. Like there's some, but they're not into idols as much and statues and all that. It's just
Mhm.
very pared down. So how did you begin to like learn about all the saints, and how did you just sort of felt compelled to go up to what was it, Claire?
St. Clair. Yep.
Yes, in Claire.
So I didn't really know much about the Saints. It was just those two. And the only reason I learned about them was in preparation for going there. Although I'd heard of St. Francis, like a lot of people, I kind of call him like the gateway saint. A lot of people, even non-Catholics, have like a statue of him in their garden or something like that. He's really famous for preaching to the birds. So they'll have like a statue with like a little bird dish to put bird seed in or something like that. It's pretty common. Um, but yeah, then when I got back, I started kind of thinking, well, when I got back, really, I wanted to rekindle those feelings that I had, the feelings of like walking into a beautiful old church, smelling incense and being moved and talking to Mary and being able to at least acknowledge the crucifix. Prior to that, I like, I kind of jokingly say that there was a time period where I wanted to pull a Dracula. Do you remember Bram Stoker's Dracula, when he comes
Mhm.
and like his wife killed herself and he comes back and he like pierces the cross, and like that's how he becomes a vampire. And like I had visions of myself doing that, and um pulling a Dracula, and that was all gone. Like I was starting to be able to talk to God again, and I was actively reaching out to talk to Mary, and so I decided to go to mass. I was like, why not? That might be kind of fun. There's this church that's not that far away. They have the incense, they have the stained glass, the beautiful statue of Mary. And so I went there just mainly again to rekindle these feelings that I had. And that's when I started listening and kind of thinking, all right, well, if you really want to continue this journey, I think probably the next step is going to be to become Catholic. And number one, what is your mother going to say? Number two, that means that you can't do porn anymore. You can't have it both ways. Um, and I was kind of teetering, like I had already felt like, especially coming back from Italy, I'd already felt kind of yucky and like just kind of disgusted with myself regarding my work and how you think that it's female empowerment, but really like the client is the one who's demanding what you do. Like if it were up to me, I wouldn't degrade these men or
Yeah.
so really it's not empowering. You have no control over it. They just pay you for, you're like a monkey, dance monkey and um and I didn't feel good about that anymore. I felt gross about it. um I didn't like what I was doing to these men, even though they were paying for it, quote unquote, asking for it. I still didn't like my part in it. And so I was ready, I think, to give that up. I was concerned about the money a little bit, but then I thought, well, just hopefully things will work out. And I wasn't quite ready to jump in with both feet though until I heard it from like an authoritative source. So I made an appointment and met with a priest, and he, I met with him in order to kind of like, all right, I'm thinking about becoming Catholic. Like, what do you think? But none of that really came up. Like my job never came up, anything. The first thing he asked me is, well, how is your faith? And I started to tell him about how I was raised and then the tragedy. And at that point, I'm crying hysterically. And there's just like word vomit all over his desk. I'm talking about, the abortion that I had, the alcohol addiction, like everything. And then at one point, I stop and he says to me, well, he said just a lot of incredible, influential things, but two things he said to me that I'll never forget. And they're so simple, but I needed to hear them from him. He said, God loves you and he doesn't want you to be unhappy. And that blew me away. It wasn't that I had forgotten that God's love is omnipotent, but it was just kind of like I'd forgotten that I was worthy of God's love. And the way that he said that God didn't want me to be unhappy, I know that it meant so much more than if he had said, God wants you to be happy. And it's the same thing, but at the same time, it was like, God doesn't like that I'm unhappy. And that's when everything changed, really. And that's when I enrolled in what's called RCIA, but I was referred to it as Catholic school. And then that's when I started reading more about St. Clair specifically. And I also considered, all right, I think she recruited me. She came to me at a time when I wanted to have nothing to do with God. And she said, give me your burden. I will take it for you and give it up to God. And just learning about all the things that made up Catholicism, I really fell in love. And I learned that a lot of what, I had been taught as a Lutheran was just nonsense and kind of romanticized. And a lot of the things that, were my like my Protestant kind of way of thinking just really wasn't accurate. And a lot of things I learned blew me away. And I always wanted, more than one source. I like to say, trust but verify.
Hmm.
It was Reagan who first said that, which is a weird person to quote from, but that was a good quote.
That's
So,
amazing, especially like that you were. This journey is so amazing because you weren't raised Catholic and you were, I guess, technically living in sin, right? You're doing all the things that are keeping you further from Jesus, right? And
mhm,
it's amazing that you were able to get closer with God and the saints in this way, because I think for a lot of people God can feel so remote, and it's almost
mhm,
like this feeling of like, how do I know that God is in my life? Like, how do I know, you know, like for me it's like this gentle presence that's always there, and that I would that I would like to spend more time like deepening my relationship with and like paying attention to. But for people that are like, how do I even know like he cares about me? He's even, like that moment that the priest was like, he doesn't want you to be unhappy. I think for a lot of people,
mhm,
God just feels so far away, and we get caught up in all of our drama and our devices, right? Like everything's like, well, I have this screen and I only believe in the
mhm.
things I can see and hear. You hear a lot of people who are not connected with God say that a lot. Like I don't trust something unless I can like see it or feel it or.
What
So I
about
guess
love?
right, that's true. I guess I was gonna say like, how do we help people who feel like God is so remote or far away in their own lives? Or
Well,
does it have to just is it just up to people, having their own experience, and they have to come to it by themselves?
I think a lot of it is if you want a relationship with God, you have to kindle it. How could you have a relationship with someone if you never talk to them? If you never just sit in their presence? If you never like have dinner with them or go to a movie with them? You wouldn't do that with your one of your other friends. And God is so much more and has so much more to offer than just friendship. But I'd say, well, do you pray? Do you talk to God? And because you can talk to God about anything, and God doesn't need to be intimidating in the least. I think that there's a lot of like a lot of confused people out there, and somehow like 90% of them are on my Twitter feed, who like, I've been told that my sin is far too great and I'll never get to heaven and no man will ever love me and I shouldn't even bother like converting to Catholicism because I'm too far gone. And nobody is too far gone. Nobody is too far out of reach. Um, and anybody can have a relationship with God. The beauty of it is that it's not something that is deserved. Like you say that I was living a life of sin. I'm still living a life of sin. All of us are. We
Yeah.
sin all the time. And so God's love, God's mercy, God's friendship, God's forgiveness, it's not something that we deserve. It's not something that we can, you know, that we can in any way like earn. It's a choice. That's the beauty of it. It's not an if then situation. It's just choosing. I I I choose to have God in my life. I choose to do the things that make me closer to Him. I choose His forgiveness, His mercy. I choose His friendship, His companionship, and I feel I'm nowhere near being the person who's like, I'm so glad that that tragedy happened to me because look at me now. No,
Mhm.
I'll never be that person. I wish that God would have used something else, anything else,
Mhm.
to have gained my friendship and my love. But
Mhm.
at the same time, like I'm a much more content person, and I like myself a lot more now than when I was, you know, doing the things that I did just a couple years ago.
Wow. That's amazing. What would you say, because yeah, you have the images behind you, like a lot of like
Mhm.
the Christian and Catholic iconography. Like it, it seems old. It seems like far away. How do you? I think for a lot of people, it's hard to connect with that because a lot of it's so old.
Well,
But I
that's
guess,
kind of what appeals to me. Is
yeah.
like I live in New England and people think that there's great history here, right? Okay, I've been places where the construction was like 4 BC. Like now that's history. That's old. That's been there forever. And I think I don't know that I'm one to answer that question because I love the fact that the mass that I go to is the same mass that's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Oh,
Like you could
wow.
go to a Lutheran church and it's a new church, like physically. That doesn't have anything to do with it, but like now, there's, and I think Methodist is another religion that now they're doing a lot with like trans rights, and they're changing
Yeah.
the
What a mess.
litany, and they're changing like all sorts of things are completely different. But you go to the Latin Mass or a traditional Roman Catholic Mass, and that's going to be the exact same as it has been for years and years and years. And it's going to be the exact same as it is in every country and every state and every part of the world. And that really appeals to me. But it doesn't have to necessarily be old. I think that there's a lot of inspiration all around us as far as God and Catholicism as well. There are saints that are being canonized, now as we speak. So there are newer saints, there are young saints, there's hundreds of saints to choose from. And I think, but I really think there is some beauty and awe to be had, and respect also to be had for something that's centuries old, that is still maintained the same traditions and the same mission statement, if you will.
Yeah. Wow. Have you since converting? So what was that process like? So you go to a priest, you're like, I want to, you start going to, like, I guess, Catholic school, right? And
Mhm.
then how long until you're able to get baptized?
Well, so I was baptized already as a
Oh,
Lutheran,
right.
but so I can't really remember exactly how long it was, but it was maybe like 3 months, I think. Yeah, I think it was 3 months. Like I want to say RCIA started in, yeah, I can't remember, February. And then you have class, meets once a week, and then no, it had to have been before that. I'm not good at dates. I think it was a couple months. And then on Easter, everyone gets confirmed or baptized and confirmed at the same time during the Easter Vigil Mass. So it's really special.
Okay, cool. So what did your mother say about all this? Like, what does your family think?
So it's funny. My mom, when I told her about like what I did for work, that I was in the sex industry. I didn't tell her all the details, but she said, she's kind of a woman of few words. She said to me, "Well, that seems very lucrative." And then
Hmm.
when I told her that I was quitting, she said that she was glad for me, that I sounded like a happier person. And then I didn't tell her that I was converting for a really long time. I I told her about my job, but like converting to Catholicism, I was like terrified about
That's
telling
the
her that.
scary part.
But she said, that she was just waiting for me to tell her, that she pretty much knew that that's what was happening, and she was okay with it. Um, and we don't really discuss it much, but I always encourage her, if you have any questions, about my own personal conversion, or about like Catholic, Catholic anything, you can ask me. And I always want to reassure her. I'm like, it could just be a discussion. It doesn't have to be like a recruitment. I'm not trying to convert you. Because I haven't, I'm just happy that she's okay with it, because really I think that a huge part of our identity, at least as I was growing up. It was just the two of us, and
Mm.
we were like Lutheran Alaskan women. That was like who we were. And so I was really scared that she would feel like she lost some part of me, or that she wouldn't think of me as her daughter anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like Lutheran, the whole religion is pretty much based on being anti-Catholic. Like,
Wow. I
um,
didn't realize that.
so, um, so for me to become like one of the enemy, is the way that I thought that she would see it. But yeah, she was pretty cool about it and said, I figured that this was happening and I don't blame
I
you.
I read in an interview that someone did with you about it mentioned that your mom was was supportive of you in the adult industries. Basically, she said like as long as you're happy. Do you at any point wish that
Mhm.
she had tried to steer you away from that or maybe wasn't so accepting?
Yeah, I think that's significant also. But it wasn't just my mom, anybody could have tried to steer me away. And I did have friends actually who, they would say things like when I when I would talk about work, a friend of mine said, asked that I wouldn't do that because it made her feel like she saw me and like she really pitied me. And I had the reaction to her that I probably would have had to anybody, including my mother, which is like, what do you know?
Mm.
You're obviously just, that's your own issue. It has nothing to do with me. Um, so I think that it's hard to consider that I would honestly, like, if I really look at that question, it's honestly difficult to consider that I would have made a different decision because I was so self-absorbed and so such a champion of like whatever I thought, like superior to all. So I knew best.
Yeah. Do you ever have any of your contacts in the adult industry, either, ones that you're still friends with or at the time of your conversion, like reach out to you saying like, oh, I wish I could get out or, what kind of, I guess, what kind of messages are you getting behind the scenes from other people in the industry?
Yeah. So the two of my friends that I'm still close with, they've both asked about my conversion, asked, why I chose Catholicism. One of them is starting to go to church. A lot of times when I do these interviews, like at least in the beginning, I thought to myself, well, I don't I don't want to make them feel bad. And so I'm not going to talk poorly about pornography, like thinking to myself, there's that ego still, like, why would they be listening to this interview? Like they're not listening. But at the same time, like kind of similar, like I know my mom's not listening, but I don't want to throw her under the bus. But it took a little while, and I've now come to the conclusion that like these are my opinions, and I can be friends with somebody and have different opinions, but this is what I strongly believe for many reasons that women are made for more than just a few minutes of pleasure and then thrown to the sidelines or on to the next guy. I believe that men are really limiting themselves by watching pornography
Hmm.
and vice versa. Um, and
Wow, limiting. That's important for men to hear because there's endless genres of porn and anything you could think of is probably out there.
mhm,
So I think yeah, men need to hear more about how it is limiting.
yeah, easily you're in so many different aspects. Like I talked about the brain chemistry, it leads to addiction, your increase in serotonin, but then also, you sitting at home, even Chrissy, you touched on this, sitting at home, you're not going to find anything rewarding if you spend all day watching porn. You're never going to find someone to have a meaningful relationship if you're just stuck indoors all day. But then also, you're never going to find a meaningful relationship if if you're constantly consuming pornography and your whole sex life is just with yourself, because you know that woman that has become the ideal woman, she's fictional. She's a fantasy. She doesn't exist. And then also, you've taught your brain only and your body only to be stimulated and aroused by certain things. And so how are you
Hmm.
ever going to find a meaningful relationship? You go on one date and the girl's like not mean enough, or, or like something ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't wear turtlenecks and like, that's my kink. She's out. Um, and so you're limiting yourself in so many different ways, and you're teaching yourself that this is your meaningful relationship, that this is meaningful, like for your life. That this is all that you can aspire to. And that's just not true. And the first step to finding something and something meaningful that you can have a relationship with is, well, I think, maybe there's like step 1A and step 1B, where, first of all, you're going to have to convince yourself that you're worthy of that you do actually want that. And it is an incredible thing to have a meaningful relationship, to have somebody there with you to share your sorrows as well as your joys. And then step 1B is going to be, you have to stop watching pornography. It's so detrimental to your mind and
Wow.
detrimental to your happiness.
What do you say to, I mean, it's more guys watching porn than girls. Girls watch it too, of course, but like what do you say to someone who's like, "Well, I'm just a casual consumer. Like I'm not addicted. I only, consume it when I need to, let off some steam or once in a while." Or would you say that anybody watching it is addicted, or anybody watching it that you're going to have negative effects?
Yeah, I would say what the latter of what you said, just because, I mean, all those things that I listed, like child sex slavery, serotonin
Right.
levels, all those things, it doesn't matter how often you do it, you're still contributing to those aspects.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment from Sizzle here. Guys who want to be degraded by a woman and pay for it have way more issues than porn, I'm guessing. I would say too, yeah, issues with their own mother.
Yeah,
And
but as far as guys who want to be degraded by a woman, your first issue is going to be, well, I guess it depends. Like, how about that ER doctor that I discussed? Like, what are his issues? I mean, he has stress, but also, like, that could be relieved by a relationship with God, or a relationship with a woman, or even just friends. And instead, he chooses pornography. I think I guess it is indicative of other concerns, but I don't know. I don't see why one kink is more detrimental than another. I really don't.
yeah,
I,
in
I think
all
you could
in all
say, like, a woman who has daddy issues has and watches like daddy porn. She has much more issues than just her porn consumption. You could probably,
right.
like, you could say that with anybody.
Because it seems in all cases it's just porn is you're robbing yourself of a connection with an actual person, and that may
Mhm.
not be potential partner or spouse or girlfriend, boyfriend, but right, friends. Thinking of it like you'd be better served calling a friend. You'd be better served like I don't know, hanging out with your pets, or and it's
Mhm.
just like having the
Exercising.
presence,
Yeah.
exercising, having the presence of mind enough to distance yourself from like, okay, just I'm going to hold off whatever it is, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, just go do something else,
Mhm.
like you would try to break any other habit if it's like food or anything else. It's just
Mhm.
picking a positive distraction. Um
And something that's
wow.
gonna ultimately be beneficial for you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're distancing yourself from a connection with a real person,
Mhm.
and just creating like a very superficial substitute.
Yeah, I
Wow.
think it's really similar to, like, food or alcohol, drugs, any other things that, you know, people are more commonly addicted to.
Wow, okay. Did you get any negative feedback from anybody and I'm not sure if I asked you this already, but negative feedback, like, when you were leaving the industry, when you were converting?
Um, Not so much. The majority of negative feedback I've gotten has been just from random people on social media, and mostly Christians, which is kind of weird.
Really? Why do
Yeah.
you think that is?
Although I would have to say it's like 50-50 with Christians. They're either like completely supportive uh, or argumentative in some way, and sometimes both actually. But no real pushback from anyone in the industry. I think a lot of people were super shocked, and I've had a few clients reach out saying, "Please come back."
They're trying to convert you back.
Yeah, exactly. Um, which I think is kind of funny, but also like kind of gross.
Yeah, like
You
it's like a
know?
costume you're putting on. Like, oh, this is just a phase.
Mhm. Yeah. But it doesn't surprise me that much. No.
You're
But
like, I was very good.
yeah, right. I know you miss me, but I'm doing this for me, and now I have now I have a life that I'm proud of, and that I do things to benefit me, and not men sitting at home.
And you're benefiting them too.
Hmm.
It's
Yes,
like the
thank you.
bartender that cuts off the
Hmm.
alcoholic. It's like, well, you can't drink here anymore, so
Yeah.
you gotta find somewhere else or consider your life choices.
Hmm.
So you're just making it a little bit harder for them.
Precisely. Yeah.
Wow. Do you do you ever feel compelled to not like you're gonna go and convert somebody because you feel like you made these choices for yourself, but what do you say to people when you feel compelled to like give them some sort of guidance? 'Cause I think about I think probably my opinions on this are probably changing too because I feel like I've talked to so many people in the adult industry, and I think over the last few years I've gone from uh like I always want to understand like how people get into the
Hmm.
industry and like what tempts them, like what makes them stay, what they get out of it. Um I guess I'm leaning more towards like how to help people, and how do you know when someone is kind of reaching out for help? How can you tell if someone wants your help? Because you can't help somebody get out of it if they don't
Yeah.
want to. You're gonna come off preachy, and
Yeah.
Christians
Hmm.
get a bad rap for being you're getting
Hmm.
shit from Christians and you're converted.
Hmm.
So I guess
Yeah.
how do you navigate that trying to
Well,
help
yeah, I
others?
think it is tricky, and maybe this skill is something that you learn, and you develop like the longer that you are an actual like church going or mass going Catholic. But for me, I feel like even doing interviews, actually, sometimes I'm just like, well, who am I to give an interview? I used to do porn. Now I'm Catholic. Like, so, and then I do get a lot of messages, especially on social media, about people. I just got one this morning about how, this guy is celebrating 100 days without porn. And I'd like to give a
Wow.
shout out. Congratulations. And he said that a lot of that has to do with me and my testimony and my being an example, and that's why I do it. That's why I give these interviews, is just to be an example to others and to be a witness to God. But at the same time, I really feel like it's everyone's personal choice. And there have been people who've reached out to me who've said, you should start a ministry for women who are in porn, and like try to get them out of it. And I'm like, like it's not an addiction. It's not something where you need like a support group because you do porn. What you need is like, well, ideally God. And then after that, it's like a really open-minded temp agency.
Hmm.
These women,
Yeah.
they don't want to leave because of the money. And then also, I think sadly, a lot of them start to feel like this is all that I can do. Either this is all that I'm good for, or I've been doing this for so long now. How could I possibly get another job? And you can. There are plenty of ways to make a living outside of pornography, but I could see how it'd be really scary. And I think that um, like I've said with my own two girlfriends, I've said, well, I'm here for you. I'm praying for you. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and I'll do it, realistically. I'm not going to blow smoke or, tell you things that I just think you want to hear. And from there, I think that's the best that I can do for right now, because I don't want to come across as being preachy, and I would never be the type of person to say, you're living in sin and you're a horrible person and you're going to hell, and repent now, sinner. Like that's not for me to say. That's not for you to say. Only God is able to say that. And so I think that, yeah, it's kind of a delicate edge, because I would never want to force somebody, further away from Catholicism than they already are. Like, I just want to be someone who is like a welcome source, who, if you have questions, if you'd like me to help you, learn how, well, like, help guide you in prayer, if you'd like me to tell you about like St. Clair and how awesome she is, let's chat, let's hang out. But aside from that, it's, I've already said this, but it's not something you earn. It's not something you deserve. It's something you choose. And only really one person for themselves can choose God. And
How is
Mhm.
sorry.
No,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, how is being a Catholic better than being Lutheran?
So, in so many ways, there's the sacraments. There's, the Eucharist is available, even as a Methodist, you go for communion. But the way that the Catholics think of the Eucharist is that's Jesus's living body that he gave for me. And I think that means so much more than also like being in communion with the saints. I think is super cool. And learning all about their lives and learning like the trials that they went through and the things that they did, and everything from like, hunger strikes to being martyred. And I think that's really inspirational, super cool. I also really like how the word Catholic means universal. So like I said, I could go to Catholic Mass here and it would be the same as it was in Rome, Italy. I think that's a significant difference. But then the main difference is going to be the sacrament of confession, and how I mentioned that Martin Luther said, as long as you accept Jesus in your heart, you can sin as much as you want. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but that's not the way to go about things. You'll be so much happier if you acknowledge what is sin and you try to, eck it out of your life. And then when you do slip up, which we all do, falling from grace, Adam and Eve, like they were the ones who destined all the rest of us humans to be sinful. Like that's how we were made. It's human nature. But another grace that's available in the Catholic Church is confession, which I think a lot of people, even Catholics, find really intimidating and scary. And maybe it's because I'm new. But I love confession. I feel like when the priest says to me that I am absolved of all my sins, I just feel brand new. I feel lighter. I feel freer. I love the fact that I have somebody to hold me accountable, when I feel tempted to do something. And then I think, well, you're going to have to remember this. You're going to have to write it down. Or, for your next confession, you're going to have to say this when you go later in the week. And, ideally, the best way to look at things actually is like, I don't want to do this because it puts a rift in my relationship with God. But either I'm not there yet, or I'm just thinking of it differently. And either way, I think it's okay that I think of it as somebody who is holding me accountable, and somebody, I don't want to have to say this next time I go to confession. So I'm
Mhm.
just not going to do it. But another thing, like, to point out for people who aren't Catholic, and then also to remind people who are Catholic, is that um, confession, it falls under the sacrament of healing. So it's not something that's designed to make you feel guilty. It's not something designed to make you feel uncomfortable. It's designed to help you heal. So in many ways, I think it's kind of like a therapist
Yeah.
that you only really that's you only talk about, the things that you did um, in desperation or moment of weakness. You own up to it. You say it out loud. Martin Luther's idea is that, you can sin all you want, just forget about it. Who cares? Doesn't matter.
Like
But
you're being let off the hook. Yeah.
yeah. hmm And I don't really like
Wow.
living like that. I like to live with intent and integrity and self-respect.
Yeah, and it seems like being a Catholic, you have the chance to be closer to God, and right, you're not really let off the hook, and I don't know, there's more to it. The saints and the sacraments, it's like there's more to kind of interact with.
hmm
Maybe I'm thinking about converting. Maybe that's why I'm asking so many questions. How do you feel
I'm here
about
for you. It's gonna
we'll
be
have to we'll keep talking.
good.
How do you feel about the idea, like, oh, do you ever think, man, so much of my content is like still out there, these videos, the customs, like how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I think about it kind of like, well, it is what it is. I I can't, feel too much shame because I did do those things. So, it's not like this is completely falsified. But also, you know, from a legal standpoint, because I closed all my stores, I really don't have a leg to stand on. Prior to closing my stores, like if I would submit a form, it's just a basic form that you submit on these websites. Like Pornhub has one where then you say, this is my content, and then you link it to your store, and then they'll remove it in like a matter of days. But because I don't have a store anymore, there's no real you know, I have I have no real legal argument because I can't prove that it was mine.
Oh
And
yeah.
then um and then also, I suppose even if I could find some sort of way of proving that it was my content, I'd have to be on the lookout all the time. I'd have to like spend even spending like 5 minutes on Pornhub looking for my stuff sounds unappealing. So I have better things to do with my day than like going and looking at all for my old content. I don't even like looking at photos of myself from that time period. I really don't want to look through the dredges of Pornhub. Um, and so it is what it is. That's all I.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
it's better to just like have it behind you. I want to
Mhm.
bring up this photo is so beautiful. This is on your Twitter.
Mhm.
Was
That's
the
in Rome.
what moment was this here?
That's in Rome, yeah. And the sunlight is coming through one of the stained glass windows, and I just couldn't take my eyes off it. And it was like kind of pretty dark in the whole church. I don't even remember if they had electricity, but none of the lights, there weren't any lights on except for the sun coming in through that stained glass window, and it was like a spotlight right on me. And
Wow. Did you know this photo was being taken?
um, no, I don't think
Oh
so.
wow. Not even post. That's amazing.
Mm,
Um yeah, this is really what an amazing story.
thank you.
Your DMs, do you encourage people to DM you if they have questions about
Yeah.
anything? Yeah.
Yeah. I also opened up an email just for that. It's Miss B Converted, MISSB Converted at Gmail. Um, and and yeah, I really encourage people to, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you even like send me a photo of your dog, or send me some complaints, or any questions, please feel free to use me as a resource.
And you make jewelry too?
Oh yeah. So when I was trying to think of, what kind of a job I could get, um, I I
Wow.
considered that I love working from home, making my own hours, but and not having a boss. And so I thought maybe I would try making rosaries. Even though I hadn't been completely confirmed as a Catholic at the time when I started, I thought, well, maybe that could be my funny little quirk. Like I'm a aspiring Catholic, but still technically Lutheran, and I'm making rosaries. Haha. Um, and and it surprised. Well, then since my confirmation actually is when most people heard about me, um, and have been visiting my shop, and it's been overwhelming, just the amount of support that I've gotten from people, and the fact that people want, I make a lot of custom rosaries. So somebody will order a rosary for, say, like their child's first communion, or a priest who had recently graduated from seminary wanted a specific rosary for himself. And like, can you imagine that you would buy your child uh,
Wow.
a piece of um, a piece of something to help them grow closer to Jesus and Mary, to help them pray, from a former porn star? Like,
Hmm.
that just blows my mind. And like, that's one of the main reasons why they want to buy it from me, is because of who I used to be and my conversion. And that just, I mean, it gives me goosebumps. Just like,
Yeah, that's really cool.
human nature can be so beautiful. And I wouldn't have experienced any of this had I not converted. And so many people have been so welcoming and so overwhelmingly supportive. And I see it on a daily basis, and especially in my rosary shop. I make heirloom rosaries, um, so they're more on the high end. I like really beautiful things. I joke saying, you can take the girl out of porn, but she still likes really expensive things. So I tend to use, well, I only use like real gemstones and real
Yeah, that's
pearls.
nice. And there's kind of like there's not like superpowers, but there's, qualities inherent in gemstones. They have like their own kind of
Hmm.
power.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Very cool.
Chrissy, let me know just when you want your own rosary, and I'll design one just for you.
Ooh, I want to order one. I was just thinking about that. I love this. Yeah, go to Etsy. Her Etsy shop is called Ave Maria Every Day. She's got a link tree Miss B Converted, to check out her Etsy shop. If you want to email her, follow her on Twitter, Instagram, and then she's got an Ask Me Anything button there on the link tree. Thank you so much for coming on. What an
No, thank you
amazing
for having me.
story. You're so inspiring. You are like, just have this wonderful vibe, this
Thank
wonderful
you.
like peace about you. I think what a cool story, and thank you for telling it. And you're helping more people than you can even realize. So
Thank you.
thank you for doing it.
Mhm.
Any other final thoughts, feelings, things you want
Um,
people to know?
yeah, just remember, everybody, God loves you and he doesn't want you to be unhappy. And if I can be of help in any way, just please reach out. Let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bree. And thank you so much to the chat. Oh, we got a little super chat. Thank you, Yasuki, for the $5. Yeah, you guys are the best. And we will see you all next time. Bye.